Okay, time to get ready for class. Semester's almost over. I just have to get through finals. Wow. Is that a washboard? When did it even get that bad? Yikes. Maybe I should do something about that. Fillers? Botox? Is that a thing 20-somethings can even get? What even is Botox? I'm gonna go look that up. I'm gonna be late for class. I'm gonna go look that up. Google.com, Botox. That's a lot of words. I don't want to read. Videos it is.
Botox is widely recognized as the most common cosmetic procedure performed today. The botulinum toxin comes from the bacterium Clostridium botulinum that through infection causes botulism, a disabling paralytic illness. This illness will affect the mouth, throat, and muscles, eventually paralyzing breathing, which leads to death. The spore-forming bacteria was first discovered in the 1890s by a Belgian scientist called Emile Pierre van Ermengrum. And by the early 1900s, scientists were able to purify the botulinum toxin type A into crystalline form and begin researching the effects of the toxin, including muscle-relaxing effects. In the 1980s, drug maker company called Allergan acquired rights to manufacture botulinum toxin type A and began to market it as Botox. By 1989, the FDA had approved it for the treatment of cross-eyes and eye twitching. In 1992, Dr. Jean Carruthers and Alistair Carruthers published the paper called Treatment of Globular Frown Lines with C-botulinum A exotoxin on the cosmetic purposes of Botox, launching a widespread continued research of cosmetic Botox. In 2002, cosmetic use for Botox was approved by the FDA. So far, botulinum toxin injections have been used to treat not just wrinkles, but eye twitch, overactive bladders, migraines, neck contracture, and hyperhidrosis. By 2006, Botox sales had reached past the $1 billion mark, and since, they've continued to grow. Most recently, Botox maker Allergan has been sold to Abbey in a $63 billion deal.
Botulinum toxin comes in 7 different stereotypes, or versions, each named for a letter A through G. Stereotypes A and B cause diseases in humans and have the most lethal toxicity. Type A derivative, botulinum toxin A, is patented and sold under the brand name Botox. It is these injections you are probably most familiar with. Botulinum toxin A has 3 functional domains: the catalytic domain, shown here in blue, the translocation domain in green, and the receptor binding domain in orange. It is the binding domain that attaches to the presynaptic nerve ending to initiate the intoxication mechanism. It has 2 subunits connected by an alpha helix. The subunits themselves consist mostly of beta sheets. The 2 subunits form a more complex version of the Greek key motif called the jelly roll motif. Once the toxin undergoes endocytosis into the presynaptic nerve, the function of the translocation domain becomes apparent. It has an amphipathic region, colored pink, which increases the permeability of the lipid bilayer, allowing the toxin to slip out of its vesicle and into the cytosol. Once in the cytosol, the disulfide bond, which binds the translocation and catalytic domains, is broken. Botulinum toxin A's catalytic domain is highly specific for the C-terminus of SNAP25, the protein responsible for vesicle membrane docking. The active site of the toxin's catalytic domain contains a zinc ion as a catalyst. The domain, freed from the rest of the protein, acts as a metalloprotease and cleaves peptide bonds in SNAP25, rendering them useless in the task of bringing acetylcholine to the presynaptic membrane for release into the synapse.
You have a wrinkle you want to get rid of? Or maybe you're just curious. But regardless of the reason, let's get into what Botox does to the body. Okay, so before we start, there are some things we need to go over first. The plasma membrane is a thin, flexible layer made of phospholipids that encases the cell and separates the inside of the cell from the outside of the cell. Phospholipids are a type of molecule called lipids that have a hydrophobic tail, which means it's water-fearing, and a hydrophilic head, which means it's water-loving. Vesicles are molecules that transport numerous things in and out of the cell. The components of a vesicle are its internal water and a phospholipid bilayer that separates the internal water from the surrounding water in the cell. Exocytosis is where the vesicle and the plasma membrane fuse together and the things that were within the vesicle are released out of the cell. Okay, here's a brief summary of the things we just covered. Plasma membranes separate the inside of the cell from the outside of the cell. Phospholipids are lipids that have a hydrophobic tail and a hydrophilic head. Vesicles are molecules that transport things in the cell, and exocytosis is where the vesicle and the plasma membrane fuse together and release things out of the cell. Now let's talk about neurotransmission. In nerve signaling, nerve cells called neurons communicate with each other by sending a signal through the gap that is between them called the synapse. This communication begins after the neuron has sent an electrical signal throughout its cell, which causes the cell to emit vesicles that hold neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are the chemical messages the neurons send to each other. The vesicles move towards the plasma membrane of the neuron, and with the help of proteins called the T snare and the V snare perform exocytosis. Once the neurotransmitters are released from the neuron, they travel through the synapse and bind to receptors, which are molecules that interpret the chemical message. So how does Botox factor into all of this? Well, Botox is actually a toxin called Bacterium Clostridium botulinum, and it prevents the T snare and V snare proteins from helping with exocytosis during neurotransmission. Therefore, the neurotransmitters are never released into the synapse, and the chemical message is never received by the receptors. We've learned that Botox prevents nerve signaling, but how exactly does this apply to appearing younger? Well, have you heard of crow's feet, the wrinkles that form around our eyes, and laugh lines, the lines that are around our mouth when we smile? These are examples of things called dynamic wrinkles, which are formed from the contraction of muscles connected to our skin. When these muscles contract, the skin bunches together and lines form between the bulks of muscles on our faces and bodies. Botox prevents these types of wrinkles from forming because it prevents the neurotransmitters from being sent to the muscle. If the muscles don't receive the signal, they can't contract. Therefore, the wrinkles can't form. And well, that's it on how Botox works in our body.
Botox is mainly known to reduce facial wrinkles. However, this is not its only use. As the years go by, many advancements for Botox occur, such as its use for hyperhidrosis and lazy eye. Many new functions and uses of Botox are continuing to emerge. One of such new developments conducted at the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Smoke is the role of botulinum toxin in the treatment of chronic pelvic pain in women. This research focused on 13 female participants who were suffering from pelvic floor muscle spasms and pain from their menses. The study, published on July 2019 by Science Daily, stated that these women were surgically treated with endometriosis and were taking hormones to suppress their menses. The NIH research report stated, at least 1 month after the MAX study injection, 13 participants chose to receive open-label botulinum toxin injections in areas that remained in spasm and were then followed for at least 4 months. These patients were described in the current study at the NIH Clinical Center. Within 2 months of receiving the injections, pain decreased in all of the participants, with 11 out of 13 subjects reporting that their pain was mild or had disappeared. Additionally, usage of pain medication was reduced in more than half of the participants. Many have taken this to mean that Botox could be a potential treatment for pelvic pain in women. Warning: this has not been proven, and further research is needed to confirm if this is true. There are many side effects to this procedure. According to the University of Michigan Health System, these side effects include vaginal bleeding for 24 hours or less, loss of urine control, uncontrolled leakage of gas through the rectum, body aches, and headaches.
That was actually really interesting. Didn't know Botox could be used for that. Huh. What can it hurt? Let's find someone around here. Hi. Yeah, I was hoping to schedule a consultation.